G'day Bomber fans, we've got a bit more clarity in regards to our 2024 draft plans as we approach draft night. Next week, in fact, it's really close, and funnily enough, the plans that we now know a bit more about will actually only really affect the club next season, all part of the plans, at least the ones in the title of this video today, because I do have a few things I want to talk about today. Essendon are going to attempt to trade into next year's draft, but also into this year's draft as well. It sounds confusing, but it's going to make sense when I explain it, if I explain it well, that is. So let's get into this video. And also, yesterday I posted a little profile on Isaac Kako. I love the discussion going on over there. If you haven't seen it already, go check it out. I will also have one up on Jaden Newen on the weekend, our other academy player. And if you want to keep up to date with Essendon news in general, I suggest going over to Bluesky, not Bluesky. I made that mistake last time, I plugged it. It's like a discount Twitter, but there is currently a little Essendon community having some chats over there, so even though it's not as popular as Twitter right now, it's a lot more fun for Essendon fans. So go over there, give me a follow, give other guys a follow. I'll have my handle in the description, but let's get on to this video. Alright, so it looks like Essendon are going to be on the move a little bit either before the draft, but more likely on draft night, and part of that movement will be the club getting the most out of this current draft hand that we've built, mostly from that Melbourne trade. And now it's looking like an Isaac Kako bid will only cost 2, at most 3 draft picks, and those picks would be 28, 31, and 40 maybe. And that means the club is now finding a way to get the most out of the picks that fall after that range, because as you can see, we've got a few of them. And a way to do this could be trading them away to a team that wants more selections in this current draft, and in return getting a future second round pick. So this is because we're only set to take 4 players in this draft, by the way. Isaac Kako, maybe Jaden Newen, hopefully another first rounder, which I'll talk about in a bit, and then someone else down the track as well. And we have 7 picks to do that with, not including the other first if we manage to trade that in. On screen is our current draft hand. Rule out 28 and 31 from this discussion. Let's say a Kako bid eats those picks up. We may look at trading 40, 46, and maybe something else to get into next year's draft early. That way we don't have wasted selections that we won't be using in 2024, and we actually get something for them next year instead. Now, I do think pick 40 in this year's draft is worth more than a mid to late second rounder next year, maybe even an early second rounder next year. But if the club does manage to trade into the first draft, the first round of this year's draft, which I am going to talk about, I would rather we do that and then use 2 later picks down the line, improving next year's draft in the process, rather than just getting Kako and using 3 later picks. So this is definitely on the cards, this move. I think it relies on a few things to happen potentially. I don't know if we would do this without bringing in someone earlier first, aside from Kako, that is. We would also need a club to agree to a trade, but if that happens, I'd keep an eye on this. And teams that I think we could facilitate a deal with, West Coast maybe. They have 12 and 26 in the draft, and after that picks very late. They have a few second rounders next year as well. They'd be willing to ship one off to us to move up the order, I reckon. Hawthorn as well. They only really have pick 33 in this draft. Any team that doesn't have much in this year's mid-range of the draft and has a bit next year, those are the teams to look at. Alright, so on screen is an example of what a trade could look like. Now, this isn't perfect, so bear with me here, but I am trading with West Coast in this scenario. I'm asking for that future second they received from Hawthorn, so rather than the one they currently own themselves, which would be very early into the second round, they'd be more likely to trade Hawthorn's future second, which would be a bit closer to pick 40 in next year's draft, if the Hawks are as good as we think they will be. And in return, I'm giving up pick 40 that we have this year. That's the main part of the deal. And to make it a bit more likely, I'm also giving away 53, so West Coast can move up the order twice, 2 picks higher than what they had after their second. And then we also get pick 72 in return, just in case we need it to match a bid on Jaden Newen. Now, this isn't perfect at all, but that is kind of what a trade could look like. I think on face value, West Coast do win that trade. They move into this year's draft, but in theory, if this was to occur, we would be doing it because we are getting another first round option as well as Kako using next year's first rounder. And I mean, when you think about it like that, this trade just makes sense because we wouldn't have utilized the picks that we're trading away anyway. So let me know what you think about this trade down below. Would you support it? Would you not? On to the next topic, a little bit more insight into how we could potentially be moving up the draft order this year. So Essendon will be attempting to trade up into the first round using the future first that Melbourne traded to us. But there are a few rules to this according to John Ralph. So we would only do it to grab a player that we have in our top 10 calculations. So every club before draft night, they do power rankings before the draft. So the 10 best players in their opinions. This will all be very different because it's a very deep draft. So if a player is sliding that we have in our top 10, we can trade away that future first, Melbourne's future first, to get them. So let's say, for example, Toby Travaglia, let's say he's available at 15, we rate him highly. That would mean other clubs might not have rated him as highly as us, but we might have him as the 8th best player in the draft in our opinion. So we could trade up using Melbourne's first to get him, the future first, which may look silly, using a potential top 5 pick to get a guy at 15, but the logic is we are using that potential top 5 pick in next year's draft to grab a top 10 player in this year's. And that, to me, that logic is sound, knowing how talented and deep this first round is. A guy at 15 could be rated at 5 by another club. So a situation like that is entirely possible. We may well do something like this, knowing on draft night how things can change. It does seem as well, by the way, this will make a few of you happy. It seems like we wouldn't use more than that future first, so no current capital thrown in on top of it. That helps. And also, I would say the reason we wait for a player to slide is because the value of that future first pick would likely not suffice in a trade for a current pick inside the top 10. We wouldn't be able to get a deal done at, let's say, pick 8 for a player we want. We wouldn't be able to trade in pick 8 using that future first, but we may be able to do it at pick 14 or 15. So that is the logic with sliding. It makes perfect sense to me. We have a plan. It may eventuate, it may not. We may draft in someone else other than Isaac Kako in that first round, or it may fall flat and we just keep a hold of a top 5 or 6 pick next year. Either way, it's a strong position to be in. I think we're currently in a much stronger position than we would have been if we just held on to pick 9. And I think more and more people are coming over to that side of the argument now. I really don't see how holding on to pick 9 would have benefited us as much as this situation does, because in this situation, we only act on players we actually really want, and that's the fun thing about it. Okay, so let's just have a quick look at what a trade could look like. So let's say Richmond are live on the board. It is currently pick 14, right? They've taken players at 1, 6, and 10. We've got the Ashcroft, Lombard, and Kako bid, which makes their pick 11 slide to 14. Richmond would be happy with their current draft haul, obviously. They've taken 3 very good players. They have 3 more picks after 14 as well to come. Now they might be struggling to know what they want to do with this current pick, how they can utilize this current draft. We can come in and say, look, you've taken 3 players already. You've got 3 more picks in the first round still to come. Why not trade away 14 to us and bolster your hand next year with a potential top 5 selection? Richmond may have liked someone else on the board that got taken away, and they don't really need to use this selection this early on other guys. They would almost definitely be willing to trade away first round picks on draft night for future capital. There is no need to take 7 players in the first round, especially if they only have 1 future first rounder next year. We could say, we'll give you a future first, linked to Melbourne, worth probably pick 5 or 6 or 7, and you give us pick 14 right now so we can be on the board. That is as good as a win-win as you will find. It's only going to happen, though, if there is a player still available to be picked that we value inside our top 10. But that is how a trade can look if it happens on the night. But it's something that's only going to happen on the night. I'll post a video about the potential targets we could have on our board trading up for. I hope I explained this well. I know draft lingo gets confusing. There's lots of numbers thrown around. But yeah, this is our plan to move up the order, which would only really work on the night, and it'll look very nice if we get it done while also moving into next year's draft. It's funny how much things can change, though. There's so much talk. We don't know what's going to happen. Really, it just shows that Rosa is at least trying to get creative in improving our draft hand, which is awesome to know. All right, well, that is that. Rosa has a plan. We'll see how it goes. It's still so hard to know what will happen. Anything can happen on the night. Cheers for watching, guys. Stay tuned for more videos. Hopefully tomorrow I'll have a fixture video out if it's released before then. I will have a Jaden Newen profile out as well on the weekend, plus some more draft content. But that is all. Like, subscribe, and go Bombers.